Welcome to A Founder's Life. I'm your host, Leo Gestetner. On this show, we dive into the real stories behind the highs and lows of entrepreneurship and how we pursue a more balanced and meaningful life along the way. This podcast is brought to you by Thanks, helping founders like us scale with reliable remote talent. Email founders@thanks.com, that's THANKZ.com, with the subject line A Founder's Life to receive some preferred pricing. Now, I'm excited to be joined today by Jeffrey Hayzlett. Jeff, thanks for joining. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure. I've always enjoyed my conversations, and this is going to be a great one as well. I'm Jeffrey Hayzlett. I'm the chairman of the C-Suite Network, and I'm also host of All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett, which is on C-Suite Radio, C-Suite TV, and we shoot live from the New York Stock Exchange. I'm a former Fortune 100 officer, former host on Bloomberg Television worldwide, a former chief marketing officer. I've bought and sold hundreds of businesses and la-di-da-di-da. A grandfather. I've been married to one wife, one woman. She always tells me that I'm her first wife and only wife, so that's what it is, or that she is my first and only wife. There you go. That's a little bit about me.
That was a nice little snippet. So talk to us a little more about your journey that brought you where you are today, and then a little more about sort of your, let's call it conglomerate, your C-suite collection of companies, sort of what you're doing really for people as well.
Well, thank you. The journey is a little bit of the movie Good, Bad, and Ugly. It's, I think, a little bit of all that, and it's interesting. I do a lot of interviews, probably one or two a day. And in the interviews, everybody's asked, what was your path? How did you, orchestrate it? What are you talking about orchestrating? What was my plan? I had no plan for this. It just happened. I started off like a simple entrepreneur. I was more involved in politics years ago. I was working on campaigns. And then I found out, geez, you could go do this for businesses in the same way you were getting people elected or passing ballot initiatives. And I was a lobbyist for a number of years. And then I just decided, well, geez, I bought a printing company because I was doing all this printing for all these groups and so forth. And I was about half their business. So that was my first real kind of entrepreneurial effort, was buying a printing company. And I owned that for 4 years. And then while I was doing that, bought a cell phone company, bought this, bought that. And by the time I was 26, I had made my first $1 million and then moving up and moving on. And then I one day realized I was doing all this work in South Dakota, where I'm sitting right now. And I thought, geez, I can do this in Iowa. Oh my gosh, I could do this in Chicago. I could do this in Tokyo. I could, and so I started to add zeros to those numbers and started expanding, so to the point where I was helping people do deals and put together companies together, bought and sold over 250 companies for about $25 billion in my career. And then eventually one of the bigger companies that bought out some of the other companies that I did said, we want you on board. And that was Eastman Kodak. And I became chief marketing officer of that company and was there for 4 years. And that was probably one of the highlights of my career, even though Kodak was having some major difficulties, as we mostly know. They were living through it. And I was part of the team to help prolong that, try to shift them more to the digital side. Very difficult to do when you have 139 years in front of you of non-digital, and you were so embedded into a box of film, and yet you were having this wonderful technology, all of these patents, over 35,000 patents, one of the biggest patent leaders in the world, but yet couldn't get out of the mindset of what they were at. And then while I was there, Leo, you might remember this, I became a judge on Celebrity Apprentice with now President Donald Trump for 3 years, 4 seasons that I was on that particular show. And, so someone decided this was eye candy. So then I went on to Bloomberg and started a show there called The C-Suite with Jeffrey Hayzlett, where I took people into the C-Suite, into the boardrooms of companies where 99% of the people never get to go, that work for the company. And you know that in the corporate world, there's a lot of people that never get up to that floor, never get into that room. And so I was there, and that show was wildly successful. And while I was doing that show, I thought, my gosh, I love the nature of the C-suite, and C-suite leaders love to talk to other C-suite leaders. Billion-dollar companies like to talk to billion-dollar companies. CEOs like to talk to CEOs, CFOs to CFO. Whoa, what if we built this trusted community? And I started looking at where digital was going and the need for trusted networks. Then I kicked off the C-Suite network, and now we have 350,000 C-Suite executives who are part of the network. We have 100 million downloads on our podcast. We have C-Suite Radio, which is our podcasting network. We have C-Suite TV, C-Suite Book Club. We have C-Suite bestseller list now. We took that over from the Wall Street Journal when they got out of the business. We said, we'll grab that. And, we're building this, and then we're doing branded services. We basically have content. We have communities inside of that underneath this big giant sequoia tree I call the C-suite, because it's like a giant canopy with this lush ecosystem. And then we have commerce. And so we're going to market with things like, as the show comes out, we'll have C-suite coaching, we have C-suite loans, C-suite legal, C-suite business valuations, a C-suite finance, C-suite, tax counsel. So we've created all these entities where we find great partners and we go to market to help people scale their business with a trusted partner. And that's really what we're doing, Leo, and having a blast. I met you along this journey, and sorry to keep going, but man, you put the quarter and you get to go for the full ride here, But when I was still building this, and I'm building it, I tell everybody, what's it going to be? I don't know what it's all going to be. I'm just going to keep going. I'm building this thing as I'm flying it. I'm having a blast. The only thing I don't want to do is crash land it. That's it. So as long as it's flying, I'm good. I'm happy. And so, we're just having a blast with it and helping businesses every single day. That's what we do.
That's fun. I hadn't actually heard the part of the story where the networking organization really span out of a TV show.
It did.
So it's almost come full circle because
now it's back into TV, but which really gets to the premise of what we kind of teach as well, that this, you have to be a media company today. You have to create content. It used to be that we would sit back in a business, and last business I was at, I had $17 billion marketing budget, $17 billion. Driving sales of over about 90 billion. And I learned that, we go out and we advertise, we market way out here to this wide funnel in order to get it into this pipeline. Well, what I've learned is, what if we create great content that people are attracted to, and then you build a community around that want to listen to it. And it's no longer about, spray and pray. It's no longer about eyeballs and ears, It's about hearts and minds. And so the key isn't about attracting 100,000 people to be your friends, all right, to like. It's about getting the right 100. And so it's about getting them, really into that pipeline and make the pipeline even narrower, so you're not talking to all these people that aren't interested in you. I mean, I love it when we send out, and by the way, we send out hundreds of thousands of emails in a month. But I like it when people say, don't send me stuff, because then I don't have to waste my time on it. It's great. It's fine, and I'd much rather be there.
Yeah, it's that's one of those things in America. I remember when I first moved to America, somebody said to me, the difference between, say, the UK and America, the UK, you'll talk to 20 people and maybe you'll get one yes, and that's a real yes. In America, you'll talk to those 20 people, you'll get 10 yeses, but it might be that none of them are real yes. So yeah, I mean, you want to know, is someone actually interested or not?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm only interested if you really want to talk, and if you've got the money to talk. That's the other piece of it. I mean, I have people want to talk to me all the day. I had text earlier, and I went to my assistant and said, call this person, see what they want. So call this person, see what they want, because I know they're just asking a general question or something, and I don't have time for that. Or how, Leo, somebody will say, let's get together for coffee, and I always write back, I don't drink coffee, so what do you want? And it's not to be rude. It's just like, can we just get to the damn discussion? I'm kind of guarded with my time. The only thing we've really got that's the greatest value that we have is our time, right? Because it goes dwindling every day. So yeah, I'm just very protective of it.
That is true. Although I had a funny conversation the other day. I'm very much like get to know somebody. Like if I'm on the phone with someone, it can be a sales call, them pitching me pitching them, whatever. But I still want to get to know them.
Well, I think that's part of that relationship. You want the chemistry. You want the chemistry. You want to be intrigued. I have conditions of satisfaction. One of them is I want to build wealth. The other one is I want to learn new things. And third, I want to have fun. I'd really like to do all those together.
100%. And, so I when I get on the phone with someone, I'm asking about, what they've been up to, family, I want to get to know. Anyway, I got on a call with someone the other day, large corporate, and I said, and we're chatting, and I said to him, so have you got any kids? And he goes to me, why do you want to know that? I'm like, it's just being friendly. I'm like, by the way, I got kids. Here am I.
By the way, what's their social security numbers? But just so I can check. No, it's like, what do you want to know? Like, dude, I just want to get to know you. What the heck's the deal? What's the deal?
Yeah, it's called being friendly.
Yeah, it's called being friendly. Well, God forbid.
Got to enjoy life. Like, I want to talk to, like, I've got, as I'm sure you do as well, a no arseholes rule. Like, I have
Yeah.
no interest in doing with people. There's plenty of people I do business with who I may not want to be best friends with. That's fine. But I just don't want to do business with people who are assholes.
No, period. Yeah, in fact, no, walk away. I've had people want to give me money, and I'm sure you have too. And they go like, and I say no, and they go, wait, we're going to give you money. I said, yeah, but I don't like you. I just don't get no. I just not. I had someone who just the other day, they were asking me about this the other day. We were working with somebody, and in the end, the guy just said, I'm not paying you. And he was, strong arm New York tactics. That's what it was. Guy's in New York, strong arm construction kind of guy. And that's just how he did it. And I just was polite for the rest of the meal because he was buying the meal. And after the meal, I shook his hand, and he's now called me 50 some times. I'm never going to go back. Never going to talk to him. Never, not interested. Not going to have a show. And by the way, he tried to hire one of my CEO in front of me, my CEO. Who, is like my best friend as well as worked with me, my partner in the business. And I thought, you have no class whatsoever, dude. And very rich, very successful, but now you can see how he's gotten to where he's at. Now, I don't want to do business with. Up until that point, I had a hint of something, but not until I just saw it. And he just chose to strong arm, and you could do that, but I always have a choice. No, not interested. Just no different than I'm at an airport counter and someone's rude and I say, I'm not going to be on the flight. And they go, well, sir, you're going to miss this flight. I understand, but that airline over there is going to be a little bit nicer. I have no problem. Thank you. And I just walk, boom. There's a price for those kinds of things.
Yeah. And you know what? A little bit of niceness doesn't cost anything.
Every once in a while, I might break down and I'm not as nice as I should be. And I'm always regret that, but by and large, I try to be nice. I try to call everybody back. I try to take care of them in every single which way. Text, I'm a little different about because you're just kind of intruding me and you're writing to me on that. That's not my preferred platform for that. I kind of keep that for personal stuff more than anything. I do business stuff, but most of my time is, email me. And I'm actually faster with email than I am with text.
Yeah, I actually prefer emails because I'm less likely to lose it, believe it or not. Like a text. The problem is, if it's not a text I want to deal with right now and then a few other people text me, yours has fallen down the list and it's gone.
Amen, brother. Amen. Sometimes I get 300 or 400 texts. And it's like, no. And the other thing is my workflow. I try to communicate with people based upon their preference for what they like. So if you are a texter, then I'm probably going to text you if I find that out. If you're an emailer, then I'm going to use that, so forth and so on. Or sometimes even phone calls or video calls. Depends on what's best for us to do that. But for me, my ecosystem, meaning my support team and everything's on the email side. So, if you text me, I got to make a copy of it. Then it's like people with virtual cards now. Everybody has a freaking virtual card and they want to connect and link it to your phone. If you connect it and go into my contacts, I will never find you again. But if you give me your card or give me that information and I put it in my CRM system, I'll put, I'm at Lima, Peru, blah, 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 blah. And then I'll always remember that. And then, that's not where we met, but you get where I'm going. People just assume that you do business the way they do business. Well, no, that doesn't work. It doesn't always work.
Yeah, you got to meet them in wherever they want to be met.
That's what, and by the way, that's what I believe right now with content and TV and video and audio is, a lot of people go, oh, I'm just going to be on the major 6 engines. Okay, make a mistake because there's 1,900 of them out there. People put their content anyway. No, if you put your content in 24 minutes or 48 minutes, much better because now you can repurpose that for streaming. You can repurpose for broadcast, a lot of those kinds of things. So I liked it's like somebody said, everything's on YouTube. Well, yeah, some of it, not all of it. Most of the stuff I see on YouTube that's business content is a place to go to put your videos for 37 people to watch. So, go to where the people are, go to where your audience is. That's what you have to do. And if that's YouTube, great. If that's streaming, if it's LG, if it's Sony, if it's Vizio, if it's, wherever it might be, even, I can tell you that my show has been on American Airlines. It's the longest running show on American Airlines. I get more things from American Airlines, from people watching me and recommending me and all kinds of things than probably anywhere else. It's amazing.
And talk to us a little bit about family, how family looks for you.
Well, I mentioned a wife we've been married together for 43 years and then two engaged for two. So I count those. So 45 years. And she says it's the best 11 non-consecutive years of her life. So, because I'm always traveling, I'm always gone, but I think that's been part of the allure for us, which is great, And although we have a rule that if I'm somewhere for more than 3 days, typically she'll join me. Now, we broke a lot of that during COVID, so now we're getting back into our rhythm of how we can do that. But I'm traveling so much these days, one day here, and so forth. We've been settling a little bit more in Roatan, which is an island off of Honduras, and I go down there about 7 days a month, which is just wonderful to be able there and see friends and see people, and we're building out that. I've got a couple of children, and from those two children and their spouses, we have 3 grandchildren, 10, 8, and 2. I have one and they're all girls. I had 1 granddaughter in New York and 2 in South Dakota, so which makes it great because I'm back and forth all the time as much as I can between the two. Although the 8 and 10-year-olds at the age where, grandpa's still kind of cool, but, I got sports, I got this, I got that. So it's the 2-year-old, I'm still in that great playground stage where I'm just a big playground for the little one. So, and I read books. She asked for a horses book. She's 2, very smart. She counts, she actually speaks a couple languages. And now I had to buy her a horse book, and last weekend I read it 50 times. So it was 50 times to her. So it was
You got any horses on the ranch in South Dakota?
I used to have some horses a couple years ago during COVID. I had horses have accidents from time to time, broke legs, and in such a way that they could not be repaired. So lost both of my great horses who I had for decades. But it's one of those things too, Leo. Right now I'm in the traveling stage. You got to be home. You want to be home to have, if you got a dog, you want to be home. If you got horses, not so much with horses because our horses are kind of working horses, and somebody said, "What barns you got?" And we don't have barns. They live out in the field. Where they drink from. There's a creek right there. So little things like that. So it's a little different up in our part of the country than maybe the genteel English pastures you might have known.
Funny. And what do you like to do for health?
For health, mostly drink scotch and eat bacon. I enjoy walking. I work a lot. When I'm home in South Dakota, it is my funnest and greatest time. And it's because I work outside, I get my Kubota, my 4-wheeler, I'm chopping trees, I'm moving brush, and I'm mowing, pushing snow. We were talking about that earlier. And that's the extent of most of my real health is that. I do a lot of walking. I'm in New York, I walk everywhere. I don't like taking cabs, so walk 40, 50 blocks, nothing for me, so I like keeping track of my steps, and I'm right now within 5 pounds of the lightest I've been in 20 years. So it's really cool. So, I feel good. I feel good.
Nice. I think it's, health for me. Yes, there's those aspects. There's also sleep. As we were discussing earlier, you've got your Oura ring.
Yep.
Right there's lots of aspects that kick into that.
Well, I will tell you that I don't sleep, but I've always been one of those persons that doesn't sleep a lot. I mean, I sleep 4 or 5 hours, and then every once in a while I catch up, and my Oura rings tell me I'm 8 hours behind right now from my optimum. So they said it's in my gap. I think it's my gap, but I'm learning a lot about my sleep, in terms of monitoring that I'm enjoying that part of it. I'm still learning what the ring will do and what wearables will do, because I think wearables are very good for everybody in terms of, giving you indicators that you didn't know what you didn't know. Because I think a lot of us blow it off. We don't pay attention to some of the things that we should pay attention to, especially with hydration and a couple of other things. But yeah.
Yeah, it's, you'll see the Oura will start telling you. It becomes noticeable if you're drinking at night or if you're eating a meal too late. You'll see how that actually affects quality of sleep and heart rate.
Yeah, like I need another person telling me I'm doing things wrong, eating and drinking, Leo.
Yeah, I got a friend who actually stopped wearing his wearable because he got fed up with the fact that it was telling him that it was a bad idea to be smoking weed before bed.
At least, I don't know if you heard in the States, Trump made it less of a crime. At least smoking weed's not so bad that way.
Yeah, also, I think the big reason he did it, from what I've read, which 100% makes sense, is you can actually do medical research now, because it was illegal to do medical research before.
Wow.
Because it was a
that's
class.
True.
what is it? It was a
I
class
just,
1 and now it's a class 3 or whatever it
yeah.
is. But you
Well,
can actually now do medical research about the benefits of marijuana and CBD.
do you remember Billy's last name? He was the guy in Midnight Express. He was if you remember the movie The Midnight Express, where the guy was trying to smuggle hashish, ended up serving years in prison, and finally he was raped in prison, beaten in prison, abused in prison. This was all during the Nixon era, and then he escaped. His dad sent him money in secret ways and so forth, and he was able to break out of prison and escape and get out of Turkey and get back to the United States. And I met him, and then he did a one-man play. And I'd watched the movie, I read the book, and then I watched him in a one-man play in New York City. And in New York, because of my followers and because I tend to text and share socially and so forth, I get invited to a lot of plays. I get invited to a lot of events, which is, I'm so lucky. I'm wonderful. I get invited to Irish consulate meet, because I'm Irish and, and so forth. So I get to go to all these cool things. He invited me. I'm on a list where they invite celebrities to these kinds of plays in hopes that you will tweet about them and post about them, and then more people will want to come and watch. That's a cool list to be on. And so I went and I listened to him, and he talked about the horrors, and I thought, all of this over pot, all of this because a guy wanted to smoke some more hash or weed, and I'm going, what bullshit. And then I think about the people that are in prison because of marijuana, or the guilt that's attached, which just, anyway. And now we find, I can give my 94-year-old stepfather, a little few drops, and it helps his Parkinson's, or my brother-in-law, who's mentally incapable of doing certain things. He operates like at a 12-year-old. Um, he's mentally handicapped, is way the term. There's different terms. I'll just say it like that. Cards and letters keep them coming. But that's the term I would use. Or has cognitive dissonance. That's what I think the new term is these days. But he has all kinds of issues of stress and so forth. One drop of CBD oil under his tongue, and he's in it. He's in the zone. He's cool. It's great. But imagine what that would have been like a couple of years. It was illegal. Couldn't use it. Couldn't do it. They just stop this insanity.
Yeah, certainly. We need to, as we learn more and we know more, we definitely need to evolve a little more.
Yeah, I mean, meth, cocaine, things like that. That's different, my opinion. But weed, I mean, come on. I've never seen a violent weed criminal. I've never seen one yet.
I went to a talk. They were talking a long time ago. They were talking, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. They were talking about. There was this professor from one top university, and he studies marijuana and stuff. And he said in China, like they've been doing this for thousands of years, and it's like, I think it's the same word as health or something like that. They were like, it's a medicinal product.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
not the same as
Yeah.
cocaine. It's not like a gateway drug. It's not a.
Well, and I think we're going to find other uses. I think we're going to, right now, I think we're going to go swinging back to more, I would call natural remedies. I've got dandelion tea, which I absolutely love. And it's what a great thing, a dandelion tea. Now, I never heard of that 20, 30 years ago, right? Now everybody's drinking it, and I've been drinking it for the last couple of years. I love it, so things like that, natural, good, homeopathic kinds of things. I love it.
And if alcohol was introduced now, it would be an illegal drug.
Yeah, well, in the States it was illegal for a while.
Yes. Yeah. So what do you like to do for fun?
I enjoy hunting. I enjoy it a great deal. I love Roatan. I love the beach. I love just, quite frankly, relaxing setting. I love sun. I love being out in sun, anything outdoors, even, downhill skiing and cross country skiing, things like that. I enjoy a great deal. I'm not a good water skier, but I've done that stuff, but I'm more out in the wild. That to me is the greatest thing. I love traveling a great deal, obviously, and I just love learning. I'm an avid reader. I have stacks and stacks of books everywhere. I'm reading a book on Alexander Hamilton right now. I've been reading a book on Israel, Jerusalem, Montefiori's book on Jerusalem, because you just try to understand that, so just things like that. That's what I do. And obviously, I love great food and wine and drink and great company. I love conversations. I love especially conversations where you take on a tough topic then you're over here and someone else is over here, and somehow you come more closer together because it's a greater understanding. Because, I host an event on Sunday nights called Scotch Sunday, where I just get together with people and we just drink scotch. It's a reason to drink scotch or whiskey or anything, mostly brown. You're not allowed to bring anything pink. No rosé. You bring a rosé, we'll toss you out. Okay. But you can bring a red wine, a white wine, basically pick something, make a decision, pick a side. That's the way it is. So rosé doesn't count. That's that fake wine. Okay. So, but we get together, we talk about topics, and usually we're way off. But my thing about those conversations is like sitting around a pub with all the crazy people that and you're having a discussion about politics, religion, sex, everything that's taboo. And yet you're still friends. You still have great conversations. And it's not my intent to change your mind, but my intent is to understand who you are a little bit better. And if we all go about it like that, we have civil. And then right before someone's, reaches through the screen and punches someone, I change the topic. So that's usually the way we.
I think you're right. It is fun having those conversations with people who think a little differently, as long as they're not so closed-minded that they can't hear anything else.
Yeah, well, you have those people. And it's good by the way, it's good to find them. It's good to find out who they are. They usually don't always come back. That's okay. We enjoyed you. It was fun. You were great entertainment, but, maybe this isn't the place for you. But yeah, Leo, I think you and I have had some really good conversations over the years, and we don't always agree about things. But look, when we get together, once in a while, we find each other again, it was like we picked up where we left off, and it's wonderful.
And not always agreeing is the fun part, as in,
Totally.
If everyone thinks exactly the same, life would be very boring. It's just
Totally.
ideally people who are actually a little open to hearing another opinion. They don't need to be completely.
Yeah, and let's be all clear. Most of us are all nuts in some way, shape, or form. It's a little bit of that, so that's okay. I think it's great. I love it.
Yeah, we're all an acquired taste for someone.
Exactly. Some of us are just better vintages than others.
And so talk to us a little bit about that sort of thread of, let's call it a balanced life. So in other words, you're working hard, you're always working hard, but you're finding time for family, health, whatever that is, going for your walks, chopping down some trees, having some fun. How do you find a balance with all of that?
Yeah, balance is an interesting word. I don't always think it's balanced at the time, right? But you have to refill the buckets. I think I call them buckets, and you carry these buckets around. You got to remember. And so one of them is business. One of them is your family. One of them's religion. And one of them's your friends. Stephen Covey said that. He said there's 4 things, like a 4-way teeter-totter. I think you have to add health to that. I don't think, and I think there's more of an emphasis on health than there was 20, 30, 40 years ago. I think it was important, but not like it is today. And both physical as well as mental health. And I think there's a lot more. Tricia Ben, who's our CEO here at C-Suite Network, she and I were talking about that today. There's a lot more emphasis on that, a lot more discussion on it, a lot more openness to have those discussions. We recently here in the U.S., Carl Reiner's son murdered him and his wife, and he's had issues for years and years and years. And so, to be able to talk about those things is very interesting. And we also have all these shootings and everything else that are going on, certainly in the U.S., but around the world, we're seeing that everywhere. But I do think you have to be aware of those. I call them the 5, and then I need to work on, am I being spiritual enough? Am I doing enough for my family? Am I doing enough for myself? Am I doing enough with my friends? And certainly business is always at the forefront for guys like me, but you have to step back and remember what you're doing it for, and then refill those buckets.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think, for me, you talk about the health side you mentioned just there, for me, that's about health span. So not lifespan, it's that health span of being healthy until I die. That's important.
Yeah, I'm up at the age now where I'm, things get a little stiffer, things aren't, so I gotta, hey, what I gotta do to fix that? I gotta stretch more, I gotta move more. That's a good thing about the Aura. It's telling me move. Okay, I got to remember that, because you get so entrenched in front of the computer or on a Zoom call or doing something. It's good to have, reminders,
Yeah. And what has been a pivotal moment in your life?
Every day. It's like, so usually somebody asks you a question of what's the worst mistake you ever made? And I said, I don't know. I haven't done it yet, which means that there's always a bigger one, right? So there's been lots of pivots in my life. And I'm going to tell you, probably it goes way, way back as I just thinking about it. And I could say, hey, Kodak was that, Bloomberg was that, Celebrity Apprentice was that, and those kinds of things. But the real ones were the mentors in my life that showed up at pivotal, critical times. I don't want to say pivotal, critical times in my life to be a guide for me as a young man. And, when my dad was in Vietnam, to have a former gunner sergeant by the name of Jones, Harold Jones was his name. He was a former Marine gunnery sergeant or machine gunist on a helicopter, and was shot and injured and finally relocated. But he became my baseball coach. And then literally he and his wife Gail became my best friends. They were, 10, 15 years older than I were, but they made sure I didn't get in trouble. Or Mr. Penson, Frank Penson, who was in a hunting club, and he became my employer, and he was a plumber, and he hired me to go dig ditches and do different stuff because, one, he needed somebody, and two, he was keeping me out of trouble because Harold introduced me to him, and he said, put this guy to work, and then I joined their hunting club. It's those kinds of men who stepped in at the right time when I could have gone the other way. And then in adulthood, there was Michael Connor, who I bought his printing operation, who taught me the value of how to read a Z-out register and to compare sales and to do this and what you had to do so I didn't lose my rear end. And then a guy named Mike John Timmer, who was a state representative who was a Republican. We didn't always see eye to eye, but he taught me some great things about values and how to stick to your values no matter what the cost. And it really instilled. So people like that, Leo, and I can go on in every decade, every couple of years where there's always somebody like that.
And what's one piece of advice you'd give to an aspiring entrepreneur?
Faster. Add more zeros and faster. We sometimes we get caught up, like, oh, I'm really great and I'm big in South Dakota. Okay, yeah, big deal. It's South Dakota. How about Iowa? How about Illinois? How about all these other places? And so I learned very quickly that you can think big and act bigger, and you have to be relentless at it. And so that's the words that I would use with somebody is faster, man. Just go. Stop. As long as no one's dying, go.
Nice. And how can people find you?
Well, thank you. You can find me, Jeffrey Hayzlett, Hayzlett. Look that up. I'm going to pop up everywhere because it's a name you don't see often. And you can find me on any social media, LinkedIn. You can also find me through the C-Suite Network, C-Suite TV, C-Suite Radio. Go look us up. You'll find us and just reach out. Love to hear from you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being on today.
Well, Leo, thank you, my friend. It's good to see you again. And next time you fly over the United States or something, just, drop us a note, will you?
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, and please leave a review.